Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to unpack complex ideas, pull out those surprising insights, and basically bring them straight to you.
That's right. And today, we're really diving deep into what makes teams, well, work. Especially those teams doing really foundational stuff.
Yeah, pioneering work, culture shifting work. It's a big topic.
It is. And our source material is fascinating. We're looking at ancient biblical examples, like Paul's teams back in Acts.
Chapters 13 to 20, right?
Yep, those ones.
Yeah.
And we're connecting that all the way to modern disciple-making movement teams. It's quite a connection.
It really is. So our mission today, it's not just about defining what a team is, but uncovering what pushes it towards real excellence,
Moving people from just slogging away alone.
Exactly. To achieving something bigger together, that collective breakthrough. Okay, let's get into it.
Where do we start?
Well, I think before we talk about good teams, we kind of have to tackle this image that's so ingrained in us, especially in the West.
Oh, the Lone Ranger.
Yeah, the seduction of the Lone Ranger. That stoic figure, achieving amazing things all by himself.
Hollywood loves that image. You see it in business, too, even sometimes in ministry, this idea that the truly great leader stands alone.
But that's the illusion, isn't it? Because when you look at the source material, particularly Scripture, it tells a totally different story.
Completely different. I mean, from Genesis right through to Revelation, the narrative is all about partnership, covenant, teamwork.
Even creation, that always gets me. Genesis 1.26, let us make man in our image, that us.
It's foundational. It suggests we're fundamentally wired for collaboration, for interdependence, not isolation.
So if collaboration is the divine blueprint, what happens when we try to go it alone? What's the real cost of being that Lone Ranger?
Well, okay, maybe it feels faster sometimes, simpler, no arguments, right?
Right. No committee meetings.
But you lose sustainability. You limit the scope of what's possible. And honestly, it often leads straight to burnout.
Oh, definitely. Exhaustion, isolation. It can make you spiritually vulnerable, too.
Think about Elijah. Huge prophetic power. Confronts hundreds of false prophets.
And then ends up under a tree, totally depleted, thinking he's the only one left.
Exactly. And God's answer wasn't just more power for Elijah alone. It was revealing the community he still had. 7,000 others. He wasn't alone, even when he felt like it.
That feeling of being alone can be so crushing.
It can. And that Lone Ranger way of working, it just leads to impact. Well, it's limited and it doesn't last.
So maybe a question for you listening. Have you ever felt trapped on that, that Lone Ranger hamster wheel? In your job, project, maybe even personal goals?
Yeah. What impact did that isolation have? It's worth thinking about.
Okay, so if the Lone Ranger is a myth we need to bust, what's the reality? What's this biblical blueprint for teams look like?
Well, you have to start at the very top with the divine model itself, the Trinity.
Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Right. Operating in this perfect, seamless unity. Distinct roles, but completely unified in essence. There's no competition, no redundancy, no self-promotion. It's pure synergy. So when we build teams based on that kind of unity and shared purpose, it's not just smart strategy. Our sources call it sacred imitation.
Sacred imitation. I like that. It really elevates the whole idea of teamwork, doesn't it? It's not just about getting stuff done.
Exactly. It's about reflecting God's own nature. And you see this principle ripple out through the whole Bible.
Like where?
Well, even the creation story again. God includes heavenly beings in the celebration. It hints at this wider heavenly team context right from the start.
Okay, interesting.
And then you have Moses, remember his father-in-law, Jethro, in Exodus 18.
Oh, yeah. Jethro sees Moses trying to do everything himself and basically says, this isn't sustainable, man.
Pretty much. Jethro's advice leads to this early model of delegated leadership. And later, God puts his spirit on 70 elders. Not just Moses.
Democratizing leadership, you called it.
Right.
Spreading the load, sharing the authority.
Without losing the vision. It's a brilliant model for scaling impact.
And then the big one, Jesus and the 12.
Right. Jesus, who could have done it all himself, chooses to form a team. A diverse team, too.
Fishermen, tax collectors. Quite a mix.
He invests in them, mentors them, challenges them, sends them out. His ministry expands through them, even while he's here.
And he sent them out 2 by 2. That pattern again. Collaboration built in.
Absolutely foundational. And look at the early church after Pentecost in Acts 2.
That explosive growth.
It wasn't built on one superstar preacher. It was built on these shared rhythms, sticking to the apostles' teaching, fellowship, breaking bread, prayer.
That spiritual infrastructure. These rhythms of grace created the environment for growth.
Precisely. And then, of course, Paul.
He's almost never alone in his missionary journeys, is he?
Rarely. His letters are full of names, over 100 co-laborers mentioned. Barnabas, Silas, Timothy, Phoebe, Priscilla, Aquila.
Each playing a vital part.
Yep. He hammers home that body metaphor in 1 Corinthians 12. Every part is different, but every part is essential. Interdependence isn't optional. It's the whole point.
Okay, so that's a powerful biblical case for teams. But how do teams actually, become effective? How do they develop?
Well, our sources bring in a really helpful framework here. It blends that classic organizational model Tuckman's stages.
Forming, storming, norming, performing.
That's the one. But it adds this apostolic nuance, recognizing these teams often face intense spiritual battles and are breaking new ground culturally.
So what's the first stage with that nuance?
Stage 1 is calling, which lines up with forming. It starts with what sources call a divine burden.
Not just a good idea, but something bigger, something that needs other people.
Exactly. There's clarity on the why, the purpose, but maybe some fuzziness around the who does what. Roles aren't quite defined yet.
Like Jesus' initial come and see call. Get them on board first, figure out the details later.
Sort of, yeah. There's optimism, excitement, but also uncertainty. People are finding their footing, often looking to one leader for direction.
So what's the leader's job here?
Shepherd them. Build clarity. Focus on relationships. Create spiritual safety. You need to name the fears, the uncertainties, early on.
Because if you rush this stage,
you end up with shallow connections.
Yeah.
You haven't really dealt with the underlying stuff, the spiritual alignment. It bites you later.
Okay, so calling forming. What's next? It can't all be smooth sailing.
Definitely not. Next comes conflict, or storming. This is where things get real.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Roles start getting defined, personalities emerge, and inevitably there's friction, differences surface, maybe disagreements about how things should be done.
And our first instinct might be, oh no, the team's falling apart.
Right. But the key insight here is that this conflict isn't necessarily failure. It's actually an opportunity. It's the crucible for trust.
Crucible, where things get tested by fire.
Exactly. This is where the team's real character gets forged. Think about the examples in the Bible, Judas's issues, Peter's impulsiveness.
Even Paul and Barnabas having that sharp disagreement over John Mark.
Right. Our sources don't frame those as mere dysfunctions. Sometimes they were strategic divergences that actually led to more mission, not less.
So healthy storming. What does that look like?
It's about clarifying the non-negotiables, learning how to disagree but still honor each other, committing to what's right, not just being right.
That takes maturity.
It does. And the leader's role, don't shut down conflict, normalize it, create safe ways to have hard conversations, offer feedback, seek restoration. Sometimes that friction is the Holy Spirit bringing impurities to the surface.
Okay, that reframes storming completely. So if a team gets through that crucible,
they move into covenant or norming. This is where the hard work of storming pays off.
The team starts to gel.
Yeah, really gel. Shared experiences, learning to submit to one another, practicing forgiveness. It builds deep trust. Values aren't just words on a page, they're lived out.
Like Paul saying about Timothy, I have no one else like him. That's deep trust.
That's covenant relationship. Or think about Acts 2. Again, they devoted themselves to those shared practices.
Yeah.
That devotion built their unity.
So in this stage, roles become clearer, the team culture solidifies.
Exactly. And leadership can shift a bit, maybe become less directive and more facilitative. You're setting things up for broader impact, for scale.
Okay, calling, conflict, covenant. What's next?
Commissioning or performing. This is where the team really hits its stride and focuses outward.
The synergy kicks in.
Big time. Gifts start complementing each other instead of competing. The team operates smoothly, effectively. Ministries get launched, churches planted, communities impacted. The vision starts to take flight.
That sounds like the Antioch church sending out Paul and Barnabas. That's a commissioning moment.
Perfect example. A launch team sent out with spiritual authority. The team becomes more than the sum of its parts.
That missional fluency and kingdom momentum you mentioned earlier?
That's it. Fruitfulness that's rooted in the faithfulness they developed through the earlier stages.
So is that the end goal, performing?
Almost. There's one more stage, crucial for these kinds of pioneering apostolic teams, continual reformation or transforming.
Meaning they don't just stay static.
Never static. Apostolic teams are dynamic. People join, people are sent out, roles shift, new assignments come. The core DNA, that honor, unity, mission focus, has to remain, but the form adapts.
The goal isn't just to maintain the team, but to multiply the work.
Exactly. Multiplication, not just preservation.
But even performing teams can run into trouble, right?
Right.
What are the pitfalls there?
Oh, yeah. Mission drift is a big one. Forgetting the original why, burnout is always a risk.
Control creep. What's that?
That's when leaders, maybe unconsciously, start pulling power back to the center after it's been distributed. It stifles initiative.
And the culture can erode if you're not intentional.
For sure. If you neglect that ongoing spiritual formation, the prayer, the relational depth, the team can just become a machine. Losing its heart needs constant tending.
Wow, okay. That's a really helpful journey through team development. So let's boil it down. What are the absolute core components, the DNA strands of these effective apostolic teams?
Our sources highlight 5 key elements. First, it always starts with divine calling.
Back to that divine burden. It's revelation, not just a clever plan.
Right. A spirit-confirmed assignment. Like Antioch, hearing that call in prayer and worship.
Okay, divine calling. What's number 2?
Covenantal relationship. This is the glue.
More than just liking each other or finding the work useful.
Much more. It's mutual commitment, deep loyalty, making space for disagreement and reconciliation, sharing the load, sharing the sacrifices. You're committed to each other under Christ, not just the task.
Got it. Third strand.
Complementary gifting. Back to 1 Corinthians 12, the body metaphor.
Everyone's different, everyone's needed.
Exactly. Diversity in skills, spiritual gifts, perspectives isn't just tolerated, it's essential. It's celebrated because it makes the team stronger, more complete.
Makes sense. Fourth.
Shared authority. Power isn't hoarded, it's distributed.
Decisions made together. Leadership exercised through consensus, not force.
Precisely. It doesn't mean no leaders, but it means leadership empowers others, building resilience and, crucially, enabling multiplication.
And the 5th DNA strand.
Missional agility. The ability to adapt quickly.
To follow the Spirit's lead, respond to changing situations.
Pivot when needed. It's that core belief that obedience is more important than sticking rigidly to the plan. Obedience trumps predictability.
Divine calling, covenantal relationship, complementary gifting, shared authority, missional agility. That's a powerful framework.
It really is. And it's not just theoretical, it has huge practical implications.
Right. So let's shift to that. How can leaders today actually use this? How do you build and lead teams like this? Where do you start?
Well, first, you got to diagnose your team's health. You can't just assume it's working.
And use those biblical metrics, like, are we truly unified in vision?
Yeah. Do we genuinely share the burden? Are we focused on multiplication or just keeping things going? Ask those hard questions.
Okay, diagnosis first. Then, when building a new team, maybe a launch team.
Discern that core team carefully. Don't just grab whoever's available. Ask, who really carries this vision in their heart? Who feels the weight of it?
Find the burden ones.
Yes. Then, right from the start, establish those covenantal foundations. Talk about values, expectations, how you'll relate, how you'll handle conflict, build in rhythms of prayer, maybe retreats, learning together.
Create that relational glue intentionally.
Absolutely. And clarify the mission and the metrics.
Yeah.
What does success actually look like for us spiritually and practically? Get specific.
And then you have to actively invest in team health, right? It doesn't just happen.
Constantly. Regular check-ins. How are people really doing? Spiritual checkups. Building in Sabbath rhythms to fight burnout. You've got to protect the well-being of the team members.
Super important. What else?
Create feedback loops.
Yeah.
Make it normal and safe to have honest conversations, even difficult ones. That's how you grow.
No sweeping things under the rug.
Nope. And this one's huge. Send, don't just retain. Apostolic leadership is about multiplication.
It's not about building your own little kingdom and keeping everyone close.
Exactly. It's about equipping people and launching them into their own leadership, reproducing the work, building an army, not just holding an audience.
That requires a shift in mindset for a lot of leaders.
It does, which means you might need to shift the language.
Yeah.
Stop saying my ministry, start saying our mission. Decentralize it.
And don't just instruct.
Yeah. Bring people into the discernment process, into shaping strategy. Don't just hand out assignments. That builds ownership.
Makes total sense. And you mentioned spiritual formation before.
Critical. Prioritize spiritual formation. Prayer, fasting, being in the Word together. Without that shared spiritual life, the team can just become functional, lose its divine connection.
Function over formation. Not good.
Not sustainable. And finally, measure multiplication, not just maintenance. Are we seeing new leaders raised up, new initiatives starting? Is the kingdom actually expanding through us? That's the real test.
That's a challenging set of principles. Very practical, though.
It's about intentionality. These teams don't happen by accident.
So let's make that connection explicit now. You mentioned earlier the parallel between Paul's ancient teams and modern disciple-making movement teams, DMM teams.
Yeah.
Unpack that for us.
Yeah, it's really striking. If you look at Paul's teams in Acts 13:20,
What do you see?
you see that complementary gifting in action. Paul, the apostle strategist, Barnabas, the encourager, Silas, the prophet, Timothy, the young pastoral leader, Luke, the careful historian. Diverse gifts, all essential.
Right, not just clones of Paul.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And you see that deep relational DNA. Remember 1 Thessalonians 2:8, where Paul talks about sharing not just the gospel, but their very lives? That was the level of commitment. They were family.
Which allowed for honesty and accountability?
Definitely. And incredible strategic agility. They adapted constantly. Synagogues, marketplaces, philosophical debates in Athens. They followed the Spirit's lead.
Obedience over predictability.
That's the one. And of course, discipleship and reproduction were central. Paul was constantly investing in people like Timothy and Titus, preparing them to lead, multiplying the work. They were like leadership greenhouses.
Okay, so that's Paul's model. Now look at modern DMM teams, often working in really challenging contexts.
The parallels are amazing. First, they're typically small and agile, often just 2 to 5 people.
Which allows for deep trust and quick movement, especially under pressure.
Exactly. And they have an intense relational focus, building that spiritual family through shared life, prayer, confession, before diving into strategy. Relationship first.
Just like Paul's teams.
Yep. And there's significant spiritual authority and empowerment across the team. It's not just one leader doing ministry. Everyone is equipped to share, train, pray, cast vision. It decentralizes the work.
Avoiding that leadership bottleneck.
Right. And they rely heavily on reproducible systems. Simple, easy-to-pass-on methods like discovery Bible study, obedience-based discipleship.
Things that don't need buildings or budgets or seminary degrees to be passed on.
Exactly. The genius is the simplicity and reproducibility. It's designed for rapid multiplication.
And finally,
high accountability. Teens usually have a clear mission field. They track progress together. They hold each other accountable with both grace and truth. There's a shared ownership of the mission.
wow, when you lay it out like that, the shared DNA is undeniable.
Isn't it? Diverse gifts, clear vision for those who haven't heard, simple, reproducible structures, life-on-life discipleship, focus on multiplying leaders, high accountability. It's the same core pattern.
So what's the big takeaway for us, for our listeners, from seeing this connection?
I think it drives home that God's core strategy, the strategy of heaven, hasn't really changed.
It's not about finding the one superstar leader.
No. It's about a surrendered team. It's not just about adding a few converts. It's about spirit-driven multiplication. It really challenges us to focus on building teams, not just platforms, and making reproducibility a core value.
That's powerful. What an incredible deep dive this has been, tracing this thread from the Trinity through the Bible to teams on the ground today.
It really shows that moving from that Lone Ranger mentality to building a launch team, it's not just a better leadership tactic.
It's like you said, a return to God's original design, reflecting the Trinity, living out that early church spirit.
Exactly. It marks the difference between seeking heroism and embracing humility, between just performing tasks and building deep partnership, between needing control and fostering collaboration.
It reminds me of Ecclesiastes. 2 are better than 1. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken.
Timeless wisdom. It just works.
So maybe here's a final thought to leave with everyone listening today, something to chew on.
Okay.
In our world, which often feels so fragmented, so hyper-individualistic, what could it look like for you personally to make spirit-led collaboration a priority, to see it as maybe a prophetic act of unity in itself?
That's interesting. Collaboration as a prophetic act.
Yeah. What might need to shift in your thinking or how you approach your work, your ministry, even your family life to truly build together with others so that maybe, just maybe, as Jesus prayed, the world may believe?